Ever feel overwhelmed painting forest scenes, foliage, roots and moss? Today I'm breaking down my plein air process step by step that transforms what looks impossibly detailed into manageable, paintable masses. The secret? Starting with broken color effects using fan brushes, working from big shapes to smaller ones and letting your underpainting shine through strategically. By the end, you'll know how to capture that magical interplay between warm and cool light filtering through the trees. Plus, how to make viewers stop and explore every corner of your forest floor. Hey there, I'm Stas. I create traditional realism art and I teach what I know on this channel. Subscribe and let's get started. Now the process could be organized in 5 steps: preparation, big shapes, development, details, finishing. Step 1. Canvas preparation. Cover the canvas with a general color in order to judge the lights and darks better. That's the values. I use Van Dyke brown with light red and a bit of burnt umber in my mixture. I wipe off the excess color, that way the canvas dries faster. Let it dry for about 5 to 10 minutes depending on your weather conditions before you start sketching the composition. Colors used in this session are white, Van Dyke brown, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, ultramarine, lamp black, raw sienna, light red. The medium is Liquin Original. Next is quick composition sketching. While holding the viewer in one hand and looking through it, I draw the main compositional elements with the other hand. This task should not take more than 10 to 15 minutes, 20 at max. Step 2. Big shapes. Blocking the main dark shapes, the darkest values in the composition. I'm using this fan brush in order to achieve a specific texture in this first layer. The idea is to let this first layer shine through in some areas later on. Next is reserving specific areas. I wipe off the color in some areas where there is ochre earth visible and let the lighter general background shine through. I find these ochre earth spots interesting and I like to keep them dominant in the composition. Next is use loose brushwork for blocking in. Block in the main tree trunk using broad strokes with large brushes. Mix warm grays and browns for the bark. Combinations of Van Dyke brown, yellow ochre, gray and ultramarine blue. Combine them with some colder grays later on. Don't worry about the bark texture yet. Focus on the overall cylindrical form and the way the trunk emerges from the ground. I apply the first brush strokes across the trunk rather than up and down. This creates more visual interest and I can add vertical details later to give variety to the brushwork. Step 3. Development. Now that the first layer has dried a bit, I can apply a second pass and go over the darkest areas. That's the areas with the moss. The color is mixed with ultramarine blue and raw sienna. I'm using the big fan brush in order to keep the loose brush stroke effects alive. Next is smaller shapes development. Going from the big shapes to the next smaller shapes. Using a smaller fan brush, I add the ochre earth areas. I like how this earth appears lit up because it's surrounded by the dark green moss. Remember, my goal is to keep this effect. Then I identify the next area. That is the mid-lid moss right under the ochre earth shapes. I block this in with the big fan brush and loose brush strokes. I like how the fan brush creates a broken color effect, allowing the underneath layer show through in places. Now next is modeling stage, moss and texture. From here I identify the next smaller shapes and try to map them on the canvas, always trying to keep the broken color effect whenever I can. Work on individual areas like the moss patches around the base. Use various greens, some with more yellow for the brighter moss, darker mixtures with ultramarine for moss in shadow, light browns and reds for the foliage, darker red browns for the shadows with foliage and or roots involved. For the roots you might need to add some grays and some subtle greens on top. Now it's time for a 10 to 15 minutes drying break. The color will dry and the next layer can be applied. Time for step 4. The details. Negative space focus. While modeling the specific areas, try to look for the negative space. That allows for a fresh perspective and helps model precise form. Next would be defining the tree texture. Now it's time to add some details to the tree trunk, so that the bark texture comes alive. This tree has a rather smooth bark texture, so it's quite straightforward to achieve likeness. Though I'm working on the tree, I also keep attention to the other spots on the whole canvas. The idea is to work simultaneously on multiple spots. This way you keep your composition united and it does not have a huge difference from one area to another area. Here you see me working on the foliage top right. Then I think, okay, now what's happening on the other side of this same plateau? So I go over there and try to add something there, whatever I see there. There is some foliage underneath, there is other stuff laying around. The idea is to keep adding details here and there. It's about the details that appear important for the composition. I'm working here on this spot, then I go to another spot, then I revisit the tree trunk again. In these cycles I go round and round until I'm satisfied with some of the spots. Now from here the sun was shining into the lens and I had no cap for cutting out the sun. That means that the picture here is not that great. You see it's overlit and it's grayed out, so sorry for that, but I mean, let's fast forward it in a time lapse, but you get the idea what it is about. It's basically adding some details. Now we're in the area of small shapes, but not too detailed. Like the foliage, every leaf I wouldn't paint. I just see what's happening there in this small tiny spot where the foliage is laying around, and then I figure out, okay, as a whole shape this looks like this, and then this whole big shape has these smaller patterns in it, and these patterns I try to simulate. How to see these things? Well, you can squint your eyes, defocus, that way you can pay attention to your peripheral view, and what you see in the peripheral view while you're defocused, that's the shapes you need to translate into your canvas. This helps also to judge the values better. There are these holes in the ground under the tree, probably some animals living in them. I'm adding these details along with other details I find interesting, so that the viewer can have some spots to focus on. Those spots are quite centered, so I don't need to worry that the attention slides away out of the composition. I try to imitate the feeling of what I'm looking at by simulating the form types of shadow and light areas. It's not necessary to copy it exactly. It's about showing the overall feeling. That means analyzing the shapes, the edges, the lines, the rhythm created by those elements, interplaying with each other, recognize the patterns and recreate those patterns. And by the way, this is how you achieve your unique signature style. And step 5. Finishing. Add the final touches to the light areas. It is a warm light on the left side, because this side is under another tree, and a cooler light on the right side, because there is an open space between the trees with visible sky. That cooler light is mostly due to the foliage receiving bouncing skylight. Well, that's it. I could refine the light and shadow areas further, but I think for a plein air session that's enough. But let me show you what could be done better. I think the light spots that spread over the ground could be more dominant, as well as I could separate the background even more by adding some atmospheric haze, the sfumato effect. Though the distance here was not that far, so the colors were still vibrant. But due to artistic freedom, I could have added these effects in order to achieve more clearly defined spaces in the composition. On the other hand, I kinda like it how it is now. In my studio I added a bit of the sfumato effect to the background by glazing over the dried areas. Now it has this glare, so I need to compensate for it and cover the rest with a tiny film of oil and varnish so that it looks unified. But the downside will be that it will have some glare, like the old master paintings that we see hanging in the museums. And that's it, from toned canvas to finished forest floor painting. Remember, it's all about working from big shapes to small details, keeping those broken color effects alive and letting your underpainting do the work for you. The fan brush is my go-to here, but any brush will work as long as it creates interesting strokes. Now grab your paints and give it a try. Curious about what's happening in the studio? Subscribe to my newsletter for exclusive behind-the-scenes updates, new project announcements, and creative insights you won't find anywhere else. And don't forget, compare your art only to your own art from the past. Now go paint, you've got this.